Should the New Orleans Saints avoid a defensive coach as their next head coach after the Dennis Allen disaster? Ladies and gentlemen, today's video, different kind of video, not really a reaction, more of a conversation. So today, we're going to talk about something I'm seeing a lot in the comment section. I've been seeing the comment that doesn't matter who we hire, just do not hire a defensive coach. Because if we hire a defensive coach, it'll be a disaster. Offense is what win games in the NFL now. And a defensive coach will just do what Dennis Allen did. Now, I want to pause this, okay? I replied to a few comments and kind of explained my line of thinking, but I wanted to really get out in front of it because this is something that I feel like it's kind of something that's not really correlated, even though it seems like it is correlated, okay? So the idea, the line of thinking kind of makes sense, all right? Directionally, kind of makes sense here where what do you think of when you think of a defensive coordinator? You think of old school, you think of punting, you think about field goals, you think about 4th and 1 punt, right? Pin them back, let the defense win the game, something we just saw Dennis Allen do that cost the Saints the game against Carolina. But in today's NFL, let me explain a few things that you want your coaches to do, okay? You've got the defense, all right? Let's just say that's up to the defensive coordinator. You got the offense, the X's and O's. Let's say that's up to the offensive coordinator. Now you have the situational decision making. At the end of the day, the decision is the head coach, usually. Now, in some cases, they have analytical teams. In some cases, they have basically MIT level probability experts in the booth who is giving the probabilities, and the head coach decides whether to risk it for the biscuit or not. Then you also want to do things that I call kind of the operational side of it, right? The man manager, the roster, the practices, the logistics, the schedule, the travel. Hey, we have a short week. We played on Sunday. We play on Thursday Night Football. What do we do? Right? A new coach, is hard to do that. A coach that's never done that before, I don't know. Hey, we play in Germany this week. What do you want to do? How do you want to set up the travel? How do you want to set up the sleep schedule for the players? What are we going to do? That, more than ever, that is part of the head coaching kind of Sudoku puzzle you got to put together. And we have seen a ton of examples of failure and success in all of these situations. Bill Belichick was one of the greatest at travel. He famously started the routine of teams practicing in altitude to then go play in altitude. We saw him send the Patriots, I believe it was to Colorado. They practiced in Colorado for like a week before going to play a game in Mexico. We've seen some coach, I think it was Kevin O'Connell, has kind of popularized this like London travel sleep schedule that they do, where they like aerate the plane a certain way and pressurize the plane a certain way to basically make it like a hyperbaric chamber, and they sleep for a certain amount of hours and they're forced to wake up for a certain amount of hours to like regulate their body clocks. Crazy stuff. Everything is super optimized. The reason I say that is because just because you're the head coach doesn't mean you do any of the three. Just because you're the DC doesn't mean you do all the three, right? You can shift who's doing what. And an example like Detroit. Detroit is one of my favorite examples to use, where Dan Campbell's the head coach. What is he actually doing? Is he calling the defense? No. Is he calling the offense? No. He has an offensive background, but Ben Johnson is certainly the architect of that offense. Is Dan Campbell doing the probabilities? No. He has a team. Dan Campbell is in charge of the man manager, roster, practice, motivation side of things. And look how good it works for Detroit, right? Look at a team like the Steelers, Mike Tomlin. Mike Tomlin is an old school defensive coach. Is he calling the X's and O's offensively? No. Is he doing the probability? No. Same thing with Dan Campbell, okay? So you have to focus on making sure that your staff is as good as possible. The entire staff. There's no more hiding. There's no more Pete Carmichaels, where a great head coach can hide a bad coordinator. A bad coordinator can just exist in the league for 20 years. So let's get back to the defensive idea of a head coach, or the idea of a defensive-oriented head coach failing. Right now, name me the top 3 offenses in the NFL. Pop quiz. Name me the 3 best offenses in the NFL. Go. Okay. You get 5 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Was the Washington Commanders in your list? Was the Houston Texans in your list? Was the Baltimore Ravens in your list? I have a sneaky feeling 2 of those 3 were in your list. The Baltimore Ravens head coach, John Harbaugh. John Harbaugh, defensive coach. Interesting, right? John Harbaugh was a special teams coach, actually. He wasn't even a defensive coach. He was a special teams coach and then became a defensive backs coach and then became a head coach. So he is defensive / special teams. All right. What about Washington? Washington. Dan Quinn's the head coach. Well, he's definitely defensive. Well, and they have a rookie quarterback. So you're telling me that Dan Quinn is developing and turned Washington in this insane offense all of a sudden? What about Houston? Well, DeMeco Ryans is the head coach. But DeMeco Ryans was the defensive coordinator of San Francisco. He's not an offensive guy. But you're telling me that DeMeco Ryans got C.J. Stroud and developed him into a stud quarterback and then completely turned their offense around? The obvious answer to that is no. Right? The obvious answer to that is that for a long time, Baltimore had a combination of Greg Roman and now Todd Monken, but they also had Lamar Jackson. And Lamar Jackson completely changed the trajectory of that offense. Houston, Bobby Slowick, right? Bobby Slowick, and then in Washington, Cliff Kingsbury. So those are examples right now, currently, like today, examples of great young defensive minds. Not you, Dan Quinn. He's a little bit older, but great defensive minds who were hired and they have the right coordinators and they allow the coordinators to coordinate. The big problem with Dennis Allen is that he did not allow his coordinators to coordinate. We saw a lot of Clint Kubiak getting way more conservative. Obviously, coordinators can't call timeouts, things like that. Dennis Allen failed at. Dennis Allen failed the situational side of the game. Unlike Dan Campbell, Dennis Allen took it upon himself. Dennis Allen took it upon himself to make the decisions and didn't have a team around him, didn't have an analytical team or probability experts doing that for him, right? What else did Dennis Allen fail with? He failed in establishing the culture. He failed in establishing the identity. He failed in doing any of the stuff we just said that Mike Tomlin does, any of the stuff that Dan Campbell does. The logistical side of things, complete failure. We've heard reports. Kat Terrell, ESPN beat writer, we all know Kat. She said that the parking was a good example, a good example of where this team has fallen, where players are parking in handicapped spaces and they were parking in the wrong parking lots, and who cares? The team was never buttoned up. Right, you see a Jim Harbaugh, his teams are buttoned up. Regardless of his X's and O's, Jim Harbaugh is a culture setter, an identity setter. That is more important. What we want more than anything, what you want in a head coach is someone who can create a culture, create an identity, and whether it's, let's just say, hire a staff around them. Because it's not that important that the coach is like a probability expert if they have the team. But he needs to be able to manage in-game, okay? So hopefully it is hiring a staff outside of just that person. So that's what I want in the head coach. And that's why when I say we like go get Mike Vrabel, people are like, well, bad news. Vrabel's defense, can't hire him. And then you look at everything I just said, he does all those things. 10 games over 500 as a head coach in Tennessee, creates a culture, logistically understands how to be a coach, how to win playoff games, how to win double-digit games in a season. He can do all that. Now, problem with Vrabel is that he wants some roster control, and in New Orleans, that doesn't exactly vibe. Let's take a look right now at just team total DVOA, just give you an idea of what's going on here. All right, Buffalo. What do you think about Buffalo, ladies and gentlemen? Pretty good offense, right? Buffalo currently the 4th ranked offense DVOA. They are 6th in total DVOA. Buffalo is a defensive head coach. Washington, defensive head coach. Baltimore, special teams head coach / defensive head coach. So currently, the 1, 2, and 4, Atlanta is 5. Atlanta, defensive head coach. Tampa Bay is 6. Tampa Bay, defensive head coach. San Francisco's offensive, Green Bay's offensive, Kansas City's offensive. So you get the point, right? Arizona is a defensive head coach. Jonathan Gannon was the DC of Philadelphia. The Rams, McVay, we all understand that. Then you get lower and lower. It doesn't really matter. But the point is, it's not as simple as DC equals bad offense. And a lot of these offenses, a lot of these teams, they have a young quarterback who has been developed. And you don't want that old school defensive-oriented coach. You don't want them developing the quarterback, right? That's what your coordinators are for. So if we do end up with a Mike Vrabel, you would hope that Clint Kubiak, if he's the OC, you would hope that Clint Kubiak is, given the ability to coordinate. Sean Payton was a good example when he was in New Orleans. Sean Payton, offensive genius, defensive fool. The defenses when Sean Payton had his hands on them were some of the worst defenses in the NFL. It wasn't until Sean Payton let his defensive coordinators coordinate and he got the right defensive coordinator in there, not looking to use Spags, that the Saints got really, really good. Okay. So it's a different game. I always say that it's a coordinator's game in the NFL. It's an X's and O's. It's a thinking man's game. And that's why you see coaches like Mike McCarthy, who is a head coach, who thinks he's an offensive coordinator, who's calling offensive plays, and he's a complete fool, and he's lost, and he is stagnating that offense. And then you look at where his OCs have gone, and they're having success without him. So McCarthy is one of those guys who is making a huge mistake. Dennis Allen making a huge mistake. Okay, and you look at other coaches who are allowing smart, innovative coordinators to do their job. They're handing over the probability. They're handing that over to a team instead of just guessing. You're seeing those teams have a lot of success. And that's what I'm focused on. I'm not focused on just OC, DC next to the candidate's name. I don't care about that. Just like if we get a Joe Brady, just like if we get a Ben Johnson, okay, well, you better hire the right DC. You better hire the right guy. And you better be able to, and that, let's say Ben Johnson or Joe Brady, we know what they can do offensively with X's and O's. We don't know what they can do logistically. We don't know what they can do leading a locker room. They haven't had to do that, right? I'm not saying they can't, but you have to factor that stuff in. It's not just, oh, well, the offense will be sweet. Oh, well, the offense will be cool. Well, it'll be this. Will it? Or will the challenges of being the voice in the locker room, will the challenges of coordinating travel and practice and all of the things that we've seen the Saints fail in, will those challenges cloud their ability to do their job on whatever side of the ball there are? Now, in some cases, like Matt LaFleur, in some cases, like Sean McVay, it works out where a coordinator jumps up to head coach, they instill their identity, they instill their culture, they can run the locker room, they can do the logistical stuff, they can do it all. And that's when you have a home run. That's when you have the Kyle Shanahans and the Matt LaFleurs and the Sean McVays and the Kevin O'Connells, for sure. But there's just as many examples defensively of it working out. And if you don't believe me, look at DVOA. All right? If you don't believe me, look at this. You look at this list right here. 4 of the top 5. That's pretty crazy. Obviously, I didn't know before I looked at this, but 4 of the top 5 and 5 of the top 6 offenses on DVOA, 5 of the top 6 have defensive head coaches. And the one I'm not counting is Detroit, and Dan Campbell is, that he's pretty fringe because he has very little to do with the offense. But I'll give you that one. So, that is an insane statistic. 5 out of the top 6 offenses in the NFL, the team has a defensive head coach. Wild. Who would have guessed that? I got a feeling not too many. All right, so don't let the really simple, don't have the knee-jerk reaction, the zigzag reaction of Dennis Allen was a DC, so DCs fail. When there's so many examples in the league right now of defensive head coaches not failing. In today's NFL, it is just as important to get the right coordinators and the right staff around you as it is to get that head coach. So keep that in mind when we have these conversations. I was going to, like I said, I commented 1,000 times and I wanted to do kind of a long form explanation of this, try and break it down a little bit, just so as we get into, this, I mean, it's gonna be a long process, ladies and gentlemen, of finding that head coach. So as we get into it, I just didn't want to see the same kind of tired thing of the DC thing. So there you go. Get on down in the comments below. Did you learn something today? Did this change how you were thinking about the whole process? Let me know. Thank you for watching. I will see you in the next video.